And that is damaging to hip hop. That is right here a prime example of what people mean when they say that Drake's trying to kill hip hop. Language like that.
Tomato.
Mike, check. Justin Hunt. It's all happening. Thank you to everybody rocking with the channel. Thank you to everybody subscribe through the channel. Share the video, share the link. It's priceless. Big thank you to everyone who's donated. If you'd like to donate, hit the Cash App right up there or hit the link in description. And big thank you to all my newest members. Divine Eternally, big thank you to you. Dion Rule Hack 3245, big thank you to you. And Penitent Caucasian, big thank you to you too. 9-second applause. Word up. Thank you to everyone who tuned in to Culture United last night. We had a great conversation with Nolan. Jay Nolan was on, BK, L. Janelle. We had D1 was on, and Brian Z. Zook, DJ Z, formerly known, co-founder of AudioMac. Fantastic discussion, ranged from getting behind what all these bundles mean to hypocritical hop to just really deep, dope, nuanced conversations that we like to have here over here at the Company Man channel. So thank you to everyone who tuned in. If you missed it, the live is available on the channel. 1-second applause to you all. All right, so the biggest story last year, at least one of the biggest stories last year, was Drake's lawsuit.
Tomato.
This thing keeps on going. You know, everyone always talks about why you still talk about the battle? Why people still talk about the battle? People still suing. People are still suing. And now all the details keep getting rehashed in legal documents. If you missed it, Drake has officially filed an appeal for his defamation case against UMG. The filing was submitted on the 21st, so yesterday. I actually read it today. It's 117 pages, okay? 117 pages for this appeal. And so I'm not gonna read the entire thing the way I normally do. I mean, this is pretty substantial here, but I am gonna read the most interesting parts, which is the bulk of it, to be perfectly honest. And so we're gonna take a look at it here. Here's what it looks like. The United States Court of Appeals for the Second Circuit, Aubrey Drake Graham versus UMG Recordings. Okay, so this is what it looks like. Here's the table of contents, table of authorities, judicial statement, statement of issues. So this part here is pretty interesting. This lets you know what Drake's team has an issue with when it comes to the previous ruling from Judge Vargas. All right, so these are the 5 things that they're gonna tackle, 4 things that they're basically gonna argue against. Number 1, did the district court err in concluding that the defamatory material constitute non-actionable opinion? 2, if the defamatory material conveyed opinion, did the court err in concluding that the statements are not actionable mixed opinions? 3, did the court err in holding that New York Penal Law Section 242.6 does not imply a private right of action? And 4, did the court err in holding that Drake failed to state a claim under the New York General Business Law Section 349, where he plausibly alleged that UMG engaged in materially misleading, consumer-oriented conduct that harmed Drake? Okay, so that's what this entire document is arguing. It's arguing that that Judge Vargas essentially erred in all 4 of those, all right? This is the statement of the case. This is the factual background, not too different from what we have read previously. They're still arguing that now, I guess, is the reason that Drake's security guard was shot again, even though the Weeknd's manager had his security guard shot just a couple of weeks prior. So I'm not sure if that's a 1-to-1 correlation, but they're still trying to make that point here. But again, most of this opening we've read in previous filings. It's not much different. So we're going to skip past that. All right. So this is the standard review. We're going to skip that. We're going to go to the argument. 1A, Drake adequately pleaded defamatory statements of facts. Under New York law, a defamation claim requires a defamatory statement of fact that is false, published to a third party and of concerning the plaintiff, made with applicable level of fault on the part of the speaker, either causing special harm or constituting defamation per se, and not protected by privilege. A public figure plaintiff must also plead actual malice. See Palin versus New York Times. In this case, the district court dismissed the amended complaint solely based on its determination that the defamatory material contained statements of opinion rather than actionable defamatory statements of fact. Whether defamatory statements constitute non-actionable opinion is a question of law for the courts. In evaluating a defamation plaintiff's complaint, the relevant question is not whether the reviewing court's model of a reasonable observer would have necessarily interpreted the statement as conveying facts. Rather, the dispositive question is whether a reasonable listener could have concluded that the speaker was conveying the facts about a plaintiff. The reviewing court should assess whether any reading of the complaint supports the defamation claim. In other words, the reviewing court is not tasked with deciding the best interpretation of a challenge statement. Rather, the court must determine only whether the complaint plausibly alleges that the statement could have been interpreted as factual. Even where a statement is subject to the defendant's interpretation, the motion to dismiss must be denied if the communication at issue, taking the words in their ordinary meaning and context, is also susceptible to a defamatory connotation. So what they're arguing is they're trying to open this up, right? Judge Vargas in her dismissal said that a reasonable listener would understand that in a rap battle, people just say stuff, right? And they're trying to say, well, it's not whether they did, it's whether they could have. Right, so that is opening up the entire field. So that's what they're doing here. They're just trying to open the scope, and they're using that in part of their argument. Continuing, the courts applied 3 factors in determining whether a reasonable reader would consider the statement connotes fact or non-actionable opinion, whether the specific language in issue has precise meaning, which is readily understood, the statements are capable of being proven true or false, and 3, either the full context of the communication in which the statement appears or the broader social context surrounding circumstances are such as to signal readers or listeners that what is being read or heard is likely to be opinion, not fact. The district court correctly concluded that Drake adequately alleged the first 2 factors. The false allegations that Drake is a criminal PDF has a precise meaning which is readily understood and are capable of being proven true or false. Contrary to the court's holding, the 3rd factor is met as well. The context of the recording, which is myopically focused on the allegation that Drake is a PDF. They're going to say that so many times. It's not myopically focused on that. The whole 3rd verse is about Drake being a colonizer. Because that verse is fire. I'll read that sentence again. The context of the recording, which is myopically focused on the allegation that Drake is a PDF, could plausibly cause a reasonable listener to understand that the allegation as factual indictment meant to be taken seriously rather than mere rhetorical hyperbole. That impression is not only plausible, it is likely. The recording refers to Drake as a certified PDF and references prison, and both the image and video reinforce these factual assertions through their use of actual S-offender notification symbols on Drake's Toronto home and additional S-trafficking-related imagery that mimics real-world images associated with criminal S-trafficking operations. The broader context further supports that view. In present day, allegations of PDF are likely to be believed, acted upon, and spread virally. B, the district court erred in concluding that no reasonable person could understand the defamatory statements as asserting facts. The district court's contrary conclusion rests on a series of errors. The court relied on materials outside the amended complaint while rejecting or ignoring allegations within the amended complaint to draw inferences against Drake's defamation claim. This inverted the standard at the motion to dismiss stage and deprived Drake of the opportunity to use evidence gained in fact and expert discovery to refute the court's inferences and provide actual evidence of the relevant context for the recording's lyrics. I would have loved to see that. I would have really loved to see that. Like, that's the stuff that would really be interesting if that case had gone to trial. Like, discovery would have been amazing. It would have been amazing. And so what they're saying here is they didn't even get a chance to show evidence. They didn't even get a chance to prove the things that they're alleging in their filing. And based on how a lot of these cases typically go, that was another place where they're arguing that Judge Vargas erred in her decision. The extra record materials furnished the only evidence supporting the court's articulation of an unduly broad context, the entire rap battle, which caused the court to replace the reasonable listener standard with one focus on a rap superfan. So that's where they're trying to position. They're trying to say, hey, this song is way bigger than the battle was. It's essentially what they're trying to say. The song is so big and it reached so wide in so many different corners of earth that people who may have never even heard of rap, know what a rap battle is, would come away with the impression that Drake is a PDF, right? And so they're minimizing and marginalizing the impact that rap has had globally over the past 50 years and what a rap battle is. And they're saying that this went so wide that, you know what, only rap superfans really know what it is. And I think conveniently they leave out the fact that this was a pretty widely covered thing in the mainstream media. So the context of this song has also been spread as virally as they continue to argue that the song did. Now, it'll be interesting to see how the judge looks at this, but you're going to see rap superfan a lot in here. Simultaneously, the court ignored allegations in the amended complaint that informed the broader social context, including serious weight given to allegations of PDF lodged against male celebrities. And the court misconstrued the law and Drake's claim in discounting UMG's republications to different audiences. At bottom, the court effectively created a special rule that statements made in the midst of rap battles are immune from defamation claims, which, whatever the merits of such a rule might be, it has not been enacted by New York legislature or recognized by New York's courts. This court should reverse, right? And that's, again, what they're trying to say. And I read that particularly because to me, this is probably the most direct language that I've read in any of these filings that are trying to hold rap battles to task here. And they're trying to take this song out of the culture of this and saying, matter of fact, even things within the culture of this are still open for defamation claims. And that is damaging to hip hop. That is right here a prime example of what people mean when they say that Drake's trying to kill hip hop. Language like that.
Tomato.
Number one, the district court improperly considered materials outside the amended complaint to rebuke Drake's well-pleaded allegations. The district court erred in reaching beyond the pleadings to draw inferences against Drake because Rule 12b-6 tests only the sufficiency of the pleadings. See Global Network. A district court's review is confined to a narrow universe of materials, the complaint, documents attached to it, or incorporated by reference in the plaintiff's possession or relied upon in bringing suit in matters subject to judicial notice. So what they're saying here is that Judge Vargas went outside of just the agreed upon documents and made her decision, including things that weren't actually submitted in the amended filing, right? Even where judicial notice is appropriate, courts may notice only the fact of what a document states, not the truth of matters asserted therein. Nor may courts draw factual inferences based on extraneous materials. This rule reflects the purpose of the Rule 12b-6 is to test in a streamlined fashion the formal sufficiency of the plaintiff's statement of a claim for relief without resolving a contest regarding its substantive merits, which is more appropriately reserved for summary judgment. Thus, although judicial notice may permit recognition of the fact that a song lyric states certain words, it does not permit acceptance of those statements for their truth, nor does it allow the court to resolve a dispute about what a reasonable listener would understand by drawing factual inferences from judicially noticed lyrics that contradict the complaint's well-pleaded and plausible arguments. The district court did exactly that. Among other errors, the court took judicial notice of and drew inferences adverse to Drake from the lyrics of Tailor-Made Freestyle. And this is what they're saying. They're saying that the court, Judge Vargas, referenced this song when she shouldn't have. Tailor-Made Freestyle, an earlier Drake song that the amended complaint never mentions, right? They had a complaint, UMG submitted their response, and then they amended the complaint, and they still didn't mention this song. Which to me is like, they knew better than to mention this song. But now they're going to fight this song head on. So listen to what they got to say. But the recording and Tailor-Made Freestyle are materially different works. From its release to the present, the recording has been disseminated broadly across major platforms and venues and has achieved record-breaking commercial success. The recording is not like us. In contrast, Tailor-Made Freestyle was available online for only a week before being removed due to disputes about the AI voice usage, resulting in severely limited availability and constrained streaming reach. Nobody listened to it. It didn't make an impact. It shouldn't even count.
Tomato.
C. John Blinston, Drake removes Tailor-Made Freestyle after lawsuit threat over AI Tupac. We covered that here on this channel. We had Idi Amin talking about it. Idi Amin was like, yeah, nobody's happy. Drake, do you really want somebody to do that to you? Shout out to Idi Amin. 1 second applause. The court never explained, given this reality, why it was reasonable to presume that a reasonable listener would have even been aware that Tailor-Made Freestyle existed. And I don't I didn't read Judge Vargas I don't remember reading her ruling as why a reasonable listener would have heard Tailor-Made Freestyle. I felt like what she was doing was saying, yo, on Tailor-Made Freestyle, Drake, with AI Tupac voice on top of his voice, said, talk about him liking young girls as a gift for me. Right? Talk about me liking young girls as a gift to me. And then so Not Like Us shows up and says, say Drake, I hear you like him young. Right? The question is whether or not Say Drake, I hear you like him young would exist at all if Tailor-Made Freestyle didn't exist. That's how I took that. They're trying to argue the opposite. Making matters worse, the court interpreted cherry-picked lyrics from Tailor-Made Freestyle to draw inferences against Drake. In Tailor-Made Freestyle, the AI-generated voice of deceased rapper Tupac Shakur sings about Drake, talking about him liking young girls, that's a gift for me. Heard it on the Button podcast, has got to be true. Rather than simply acknowledging the lyrics' existence, the court relied on those lyrics as a key element of its erroneously broad understanding of the relevant context and used its subjective interpretation of the lyrics to contradict Drake's allegations. Notwithstanding the court's obligation to make all reasonable inferences in Drake's favor, the court never explained why, let alone establish that, the only inference a reasonable listener could have made from an artistically projected and AI-generated voice of Tupac was a factual message from Drake designed to goad Lamar into making PDF allegations against him. Right, and so this is where it gets really interesting in terms of how a judge might see this. Because what they're trying to say is, yo, this song is too small, didn't make a big enough impact for a reasonable listener to even hear it. But even if a reasonable listener does listen to this, the judge shouldn't have said that if someone heard this song, the only way to take that interpretation was the fact that Drake, with AI Tupac on his voice, said, talk about him liking young girls as a gift for me. They're going to allude, they're sitting here saying that a reasonable listener wouldn't take this that way. But when a reasonable listener listens to Not Like Us, there's only one thing they could take away from that, because it's myopic and he is a PDF, right? That is what they're saying. So they're playing two sides of the coin. And there's a few examples within this filing where they do that, and we'll get to them. But right now, we'll see how a judge looks at it. The court then compounded its error by inferring that reasonable listeners would have understood the allegations in the recording as a callback to that supposed goading, again, without any analysis of how the reasonable listener would have been exposed to the lyrics in Tailor-Made Freestyle, let alone interpreted them in that manner. Yeah, see what I'm saying? The court further, if implicitly reasoned that if the statements in the recording were a response to Tailor-Made Freestyle, reasonable listeners could not understand them as factual assertions. But the inference failed even on its own terms. It simply does not follow that if the unequivocal lyrics in the recording are callbacks, they cannot also reasonably be perceived as asserting facts, right? And so I see what they're saying there. They're saying, yeah, it's a callback, but that doesn't necessarily mean that these are hyperbolic statements, hyperbolic exaggerated statements, right? Now, I see what they're doing there, because like part of it's like, well, I'm going to go ahead and say this because you said it, so so maybe you self-snitching. Maybe Drake was self-snitching the whole time, right? I mean, that's where my mind would go if I was reviewing this case, but I do see what they're saying. What they're saying is, like, even if it was a callback to that song, that doesn't necessarily mean that they also can't be, the way you're saying them is asserting them as facts, right? It's a thin line there, but I see what they're trying to do. The two are not mutually exclusive, nor do the other songs on which the court relied support its strained inference. Unlike the recording, the other songs cover a variety of topics that have nothing to do with the scurrilous lie that Drake abuses children. Lamar in Euphoria explaining that he hates the way Drake walks and dresses. Lamar in 616 in LA explaining that Drake's entourage is there to hustle him. Drake in Family Matters casting doubt on the paternity of Lamar's child. And accusing the man of beating his wife. That's dark and dirty and ugly and disgusting. It deserved the response that Not Like Us. It deserved Not Like Us. I'm sorry. Ultimately, this yielded a glaring contradiction. The court simultaneously held that all reasonable listeners would have understood an inauthentic computer-generated voice, one that was not even Drake's voice, to be a personal, factual, and literal invitation to Lamar to talk about Drake liking young girls, while at the same time understanding that Lamar's personal, unequivocal, and repeated response that Drake is a criminal PDF was nothing more than hyperbole. The district court's use of judicially noticed materials to make inferences against Drake is similar to the approach this court condemned in Global Network. There, the trial court dismissed a plaintiff's claim that the defendant improperly denied it the opportunity to open a franchise, reasoning that its prior criminal activities and its past practice of failing to deal honestly with the defendant constituted valid reasons for denying the franchise. In arriving at its conclusions, the trial court quoted from the president of the plaintiff's company testimony as a government witness in certain criminal proceedings and a final FCC determination, even though none of the quoted material was mentioned in plaintiff's complaint. This court reversed, criticizing the district court for considering external material in its ruling and relying on those materials to make a finding of fact that controverted the plaintiff's own factual assertions set out in its complaint. The same result is warranted here. The district court's error here was particularly egregious given the well-pleaded allegations that due to the recording's unique success, it was understood at a minimum could reasonably be understood as a discrete work making serious and alarming factual allegations about Drake. Drake alleged that millions of people believed the defamatory material to be true and provided over 60 examples of individuals from a cross-section of the general public who expressed the belief that defamatory material conveyed the fact that Drake was a pedophile. The court dismissed this evidence, stating that support for almost any proposition, no matter how far-fetched, fantastical, or unreasonable, can be found with little effort on the internet. And the court was right. 1 second applause. Whatever merit there might be to such an argument at the trial or summary judgment, there is no support for preemptively assigning zero weight at the pleading stage to scores of public comments, especially where such comments reflect the same understanding as actual human beings who attacked Drake's home just days after the initial publication. And they keep saying this. They keep saying that Not Like Us is the reason why his security guard got shot. And I think that there's enough evidence out there to say that it could be a number of different things. So they're trying to pin it on this one song, and I just don't see that. As this court and others have explained, the fact that numerous individuals did interpret the statements as factual is relevant to whether it is reasonable to do so. And this is what they were talking about earlier. They were saying the judge ruled that a reasonable, it's not whether or not it did, it's whether it could have. Could have a reasonable listener come to that conclusion, right? And that's another reason why they're trying to narrow the scope of what a reasonable listener, or broaden the scope of what a reasonable listener is in here, right? Because the song got so big, they're saying even non-rap fans would be now considered the reasonable listener. And the judge ruled, not necessarily directly, she ruled that a reasonable listener wouldn't make that decision, which I think, from my point of view, means that she was considering a reasonable listener someone who's aware of what's going on. As this court and others have explained, the fact that numerous individuals did interpret the statements as factual is relevant to whether it is reasonable to do so. See Palin versus New York Times, indicating that a social media backlash was relevant in determining that readers perceived the false statements as fact-based. See Zuckerbrot versus Hunte. In proper context, an ordinary reader plainly could, and plaintiffs alleged did, understand the Instagram commentary as conveying facts, not merely opinion. See Accord Hazelwood versus Netflix, considering samples of messages from individuals and determining that a statement was likely to be taken as fact, applying Texas law. In addition, and contrary to the court's suggestion, it was not just faceless internet users in comment sections, chat rooms, and servers who viewed the defamatory material as stating facts. Entertainment industry insiders and media experts on Hollywood affairs also interpreted the recording as a factual indictment of Drake that could lead to legal or other real-world consequences. See, participating in NPR program indicating that they took the allegations seriously and they believed they could be true. Actor-comedian Seth Rogen framing the recording as accusing Drake of PDF, although fact and expert discovery would shed further light, these allegations were more than sufficient at the pleading stage. The judicial court further erred in applying judicial notice even in an uneven manner. The court took judicial notice out of materials that supported Drake's allegations that a reasonable person could take the assertions of fact, yet fail to give them any weight or draw inferences from them. NPR reporter stating society treats PDF accusations more seriously than physical abuses of women. News articles discussing how the recording accuses Drake of having inappropriate relationships with minors. It is black letter law that at the pleading stage, a court is not permitted to use judicially noticed materials to rebut a complaint's well-pleaded allegations while simultaneously ignoring judicially noticed materials that support those same allegations. The court's disregard of Drake's allegations and selective reliance on existing extrinsic materials deprive Drake of the procedural protections of Rule 12D, which requires converting a motion to dismiss to a motion for summary judgment when a court considers matters outside of the pleadings, global network. This mandatory rule deters trial courts from engaging in fact-finding when ruling on a motion to dismiss and ensures that when a trial judge considers evidence dehors the complaint, a plaintiff will have an opportunity to contest defendants' relied upon evidence by submitting material that controverts it. The district court's actions here deprive Drake of that opportunity. Had the court converted the motion to dismiss to one for summary judgment, Drake would have disputed that any meaningful audience, much less all reasonable listeners, heard tailor-made freestyle or took it seriously, challenging the court's extra pleadings, inferences, and explaining why those lyrics do not reflect Drake saying anything factual or goading. This is what I'm talking about. This right here, right? They're right here saying a reasonable person wouldn't take Drake seriously by saying, talk about him liking young girls as a gift from me. Heard it on the Button podcast, it's gotta be true. No reasonable person would assume that. I mean, he used AI Tupac. Like, no one would, that doesn't even make sense. No one would take that as factual or goading. But then they're on the other side, they're trying to say, but this song right here is so big that it's impacted so many people that everybody believes it.
Tomato.
A lot of two-sidedness here. And so that's going to be, this part again, as I mentioned earlier, will be critical in how the judge looks at this, right? Because over here, yeah. Definitely. Every reasonable person, 100% sure. Over here, well, if we had gotten a chance to go to court, I could explain to you why no reasonable person over here. So this one is two-part. They're going for the procedural, but they're also poking holes in the idea that a reasonable person listens to this. They're going to believe Drake. You're going to take Drake at his word. We'll see. Drake also would have offered expert testimony and survey evidence to inform the court about the relevant audiences for each publication. Drake also could have provided evidence of how others, such as UMG executives and Lamar's team, expected the public to understand the recording's allegations. The court's decision to consider extra complaint materials proffered by UMG while depriving Drake of an opportunity to introduce his own evidence contravenes Rule 12D and mandates reversal. 2, the district court made multiple errors in defining the relevant context. Reversal is further warranted because court's definition of the relevant context was simultaneously too broad, looking to additional songs that were nowhere near as popular as the recording, too narrow, in ignoring the societal context in which allegations of PDF are taken seriously, and disregarded repeat publications by failing to account for their different contexts and audiences. A, the district court's context definition was too broad. The court defined the relevant context too broadly, namely as the entire rap battle between Drake and Lamar, including 6 songs that preceded the recording. In doing so, it's impermissibly relied on information outside the amended complaint and replaced the reasonable listener with a rap superfan. Right? Here's that argument again. Drake's well-pleaded allegations make clear that the recording's audience is exponentially larger than the rap battle audience. Indeed, the next most popular song, Euphoria, only had 4.1% of the recording's streams and views. Compare with the other songs in the rap battle had even less. Push-Ups had 2.4%. Family Matters had 2.1%. I guess Push-Ups did better than Family Matters. Push-Ups did better than Family Matters. That, I guess, officially in the numbers, is the last time Drake was winning. Push-Ups. Push-Ups the last time Drake was ahead. 1 second pause. All right. Get some facts out of here. And Meet the Grams had 2.2%. So Meet the Grams did better than Family Matters. Stomp that whole light out that night. We're going to kill that real quick before that gets a chance to get going. These statistics show exactly what Drake alleged and what the district court was required to, but failed to credit that of all the songs published during the rap beef, the recording is the only one that broke through the noise and achieved cultural ubiquity. The reasonable listener of the recording is therefore someone who heard the recording but had surely not heard all the songs in the rap battle. That's what they're alleging here. This footnote says this analysis excludes the other songs in the rap battle because tailor-made freestyle was removed from streaming services and was never mentioned in the amended complaint. There was no available streaming data for 616 in LA, possibly because it too was never available on certain streaming services. See Peter A. Barry, who won the Drake and Kendrick Lamar diss war, the numbers behind the beef chart metric. Back to the filing. The reasonable listener of the recording is therefore someone who heard the recording but had surely not heard all the songs in the rap battle. The district court's overly broad context definition contravenes New York law. The relevant question is what circumstances, in addition to the literal text of the communication, would the reasonable listener or listener perceived or use in determining whether or not a factual assertion was being made. Nothing suggests that the reasonable person had been exposed to or would separately seek out and listen to all 6 additional, far less popular songs before forming a view as to whether Lamar was truly alleging, as a matter of fact, that Drake is a PDF. And I don't think that was necessarily the point of Judge Vargas's argument. I know that these guys have to be Drake superfans because they're his legal team. So they're arguing from a pro-Drake standpoint in this situation. I look at what Vargas is arguing. It's not even necessarily strictly about, well, did someone listen to all these different songs and come to the conclusion that Kendrick was using hyperbolic opinion? Just the idea of a rap battle itself is one of these things that is just culturally ubiquitous as well. And so if I hear any song that is part of a rap battle, I'm not necessarily listening to that song thinking that everything is 100% true. Even though I do understand that rap battles have a lot of truth in them. But because it's a rap battle, that is the context. The context is the fact that this is a rap battle. Again, this wasn't a song that just came out of nowhere and Kendrick was like, here you go, PDF, all your friends moving flocks, right? That's not what this is, and this is what they're arguing. The court's own reasoning shows this absurdity despite acknowledging the unprecedented reach of the recording, and they say that a lot, right? It nevertheless concluded that a reasonable listener is the one who knew the recording was initially published in a rap battle, was aware of all 6 preceding songs, but not only listened to far less popular tailor-made freestyle, but was quite familiar with its lyrics, interpreted those lyrics, including the AI-generated voice of the rapper Tupac, as Drake making allegations about himself and goading Lamar into doing the same, and 5, therefore concluded that the allegations could not also be statements of fact. Footnote, complaint, and 3, the Heart Part 6, post-dated Not Like Us and was released only on YouTube, not Spotify. The district court committed legal error when it determined that the relevant audience was not the public at large, but rather a subset of the population that brought specialized knowledge of extraneous material to and made illogical references regarding the defamatory statements, concluding that the relevant audience was the public at large rather than an amorphous subset of evangelical Christian readers who would be familiar with the details of the plaintiff's faith and the story redemption. Now, this is a reference to a case called C. Lindell versus Mail Media. As support for his view that the relevant context should be defined as the entire war of words between Drake and Kendrick Lamar, the district court relied on 3 cases, Rappaport versus Barstool, Terrain versus Lou, and Steinhilber versus Alphonse. None supports his conclusion. So this is where they're going to break down why these 3 cases aren't exactly an apples to apples comparison to what's happening here with Drake and Kendrick. In Rappaport, Barstool Sports, sports and pop culture website, terminated actor Michael Rappaport's contract after a public disintegration of their relationship. Barstool Sports then published the fire rap video, making a variety of exaggerated and vitriolic claims about Rappaport. On summary judgment, the court concluded that no reasonable person could have viewed the fire rap video as alleging facts. The court relied on the video's clearly hyperbolic statements, like Rappaport being a 10-gallon drum of curdled milk. It's obviously doctored. Images like Rappaport depicted as a cartoon cracker walking down the street. It's vulgarity. The video referred to Rappaport as a walking blob of jizz. And it did do that. That was so funny. And the way the video attacked all aspects of Rappaport's life. You know, never been the biggest fan of Barstool, but the way Rappaport been acting in recent years, I'm glad they won. Crucially, the court emphasized that the video itself described the recent history of the acrimonious dispute that resulted in Rappaport's termination just days before the video's publication. That background contextualized for the audience that The statements in the video were being offered in the midst of a hostile public feud between Rappaport and Barstool, which made it less likely that the assertions in the video would be taken seriously. Rappaport is a far cry from this case. For starters, the court in Rappaport ruled on summary judgment after a fulsome discovery that afforded the opportunity to submit a test evidence relevant to the social context informing the defamation claim, whereas the court here dismissed the claim at the pleading stage without any opportunity for Drake to submit evidence to counter the inferences the court drew from its misapplication of judicial notice. Beyond this dispositive procedural distinction, those who view the fire rap video, which did not achieve cultural ubiquity, were likely to be familiar with the prior mudslingings between Rappaport and Barstool Sports, which the video itself laid out. In contrast, the global listeners of the recording would not necessarily have known about the rap battle between Lamar and Drake, which the recording does not recount. Additionally, the recording, coupled with images, use of real S-offender warning symbols, makes a serious allegation in the contrast with the fire rap video's images of Rappaport's Photoshopped to be, for example, a walking saltine cracker. That recording accuses Drake of one crime, R-ing children, whereas the fire rap video attacked all aspects of Rappaport's life. Around Touraine, it says the court's reliance on the unpublished decision in Touraine 2 fares no better there. The plaintiff, a radio DJ, was engaged in an on-air war of words with a rival DJ. The plaintiff stated that he wanted to abuse his rival's 4-year-old daughter. The defendant, it's disgusting.
Tomato.
The defendant, a local politician, responded at a press conference stating that the plaintiff was a sick, racist PDF that must be put behind bars. Touraine concluded that the defendant's press conference statements were non-actionable opinion because he was clearly expressing his disdain for the plaintiff's comments on the radio, not accusing the plaintiff of committing actual acts of PDF. Although Touraine 2 rejected the argument that the trial court should not have considered the plaintiff prior on-air comments, its analysis does not apply here. The court reasoned that the plaintiff himself introduced this context in his complaint, whereas Drake did not plead that the recording's PDF allegations were comments on his prior songs, nor does the recording reference those songs. Instead, Drake pleaded that the vast majority of the recording's listeners were unaware of the lyrics of the prior songs. Consequently, reasonable listeners could and did understand the recording as asserting as a factual matter that Drake abused children. By contrast, in Touraine, the defendant expressly tied his editorial statements to Touraine's on-air comments and never alleged that Touraine had actually committed any acts of PDF. And here, unlike Touraine, the statements in the recordings are reinforced by the image and video. And finally, district court relied on Stein-Hilbert, but that case illustrates why Drake's claims should survive the pleading stage. There, the plaintiff continued to work during a labor union strike. The defendants, members of the striking labor union, created a tape-recorded message that played to anyone dialing with private telephone number provided to union members. The message made various jabs at the plaintiff, mocking her weight, age, lack of talent, and status as a dishonorable scab. During picketing activity, the defendants also raised a banner saying that the plaintiff was a scab. During picketing activity, the defendants also raised a banner saying that the plaintiff was a scab and sucked. Stein-Hilbert held that reasonable listeners, those who had the special number of the union information line and those who picketed, would have understood the defendant's statements as tasteless effort to lampoon plaintiffs for her activities as a scab. This case is not Stein-Hilbert. Most importantly, the audiences are vastly different in scope. The message in Stein-Hilbert was played only to union members who were steeped in the context of the ongoing labor dispute and given access to the number. The recording was not published exclusively to rap lovers or those familiar with the rap battle. Instead, it was a worldwide phenomenon played billions of times, including to teenagers at school dances, bar mitzvahs, parents driving carpools and minivans, and football fans watching the Super Bowl, most of whom had never heard of the rap battle or listened to prior songs. 1 second applause. Everybody loves it. It is a catchy ditty that teaches kids Reconstruction era history and the type of people to stay away from. 1 second applause. I'm not mad at it. While some subset of listeners may have understood the context of which the district court relied, the overwhelmingly majority of listeners would not have. And regardless of which interpretation of the lyrics was most reasonable, it is indisputable that reasonable listeners could have understood the recording as a standalone entity asserting facts. Moreover, in Rappaport, the defamatory statements in Stein-Hilbert attacked many aspects of the plaintiff's character, whereas the recording is myopically focused on one indictment, Drake being a certified PDF. And that is not what is myopically, it's not myopically focused on that. They keep saying it over and over again because they want this to be true, but it's not.
Tomato.
The district court's context definition was too narrow. As the amended complaint alleges, the reasonable listener would understand the defamatory statements in the broader context of modern attitudes toward allegations of PDF and S abuse. Unlike district courts theorizing about the parochial understanding that may have been common to rap aficionados, the amended complaint describes how the general public, including not just rap fans, but most consumers of modern music and entertainment, are primed to believe and even act upon allegations of PDF when lodged against powerful or famous figures. The recording came in the wake of serious reckoning that led to the downfall of famous figures, including rappers like R. Kelly and Sean Diddy Combs. R. Kelly's a rapper. I guess they're calling him a rapper here. Okay. Outside the rap world, film producer Harvey Weinstein was convicted of R, and financier Jeffrey Epstein was charged with S trafficking minors but died before trial. This background primed the average reasonable listener to interpret the recording's allegations against Drake as literal and factual allegations of abuse, compare Drake with S criminals, and call for similar punishment. Drake needs to be locked up. That was an example. They should start an investigation on Drake. Look how Diddy and Jeffrey Epstein turned out. That was another example. This is unsurprising given Drake's well-pleaded allegations about how conspiracy theories involving child S abuse spread rapidly and can induce mob mentality and vigilantism. There is no other way to interpret, especially at the pleading stage, in the absence of any contrary evidence, the immediate violence launched against Drake at his home, depicted in an image, they keep saying that again, alongside the viral online backlash that followed. Even entertainment media figures viewed the recording through the lens of the hashtag #MeToo movement, suggesting it could be a potential tipping point in the movement. In sum, the social context would have caused a reasonable listener to believe that the allegations in the recording are true. And C, the district court's context definition did not account for UMG's republications. UMG repeatedly republished the defamatory statements in the recording in altered forms and to new audiences far afield from the context of the rap battle, including when it released a video which reinforced the recording's allegations through PDF-related imagery, permitted the recording to be played to a crowd of potential voters and political enthusiasts at the Democratic National Convention and at a Kamala Harris rally. Allowed Lamar to play the recording 5 times to record-breaking numbers of fans and social media users of all stripes on TikTok and Instagram during the Juneteenth pop-out concert and aggressively publicized the performance. 4, authorized and advocated for the recording to be played at the Grammy Awards. And 5, arranged for the recording to be performed at the largest Super Bowl halftime show in history. Yet the district court held that the context for each of these republications was necessarily the same the entire rap battle. That was an error. Under New York law, republication of defamatory material gives rise to a new cause of action for defamation because a republication is intended to and actually reaches a new audience. For each publication, instead of parsing out and evaluating the challenge statements in isolation, New York courts look into immediate context and to the broader social context of the statement to determine whether a reasonable person would construe it as making actual factual allegation. Determining the context is not so easy. The infinite variety of meanings conveyed by words, depending on the words themselves and their purpose, the circumstances surrounding their use, and the manner, tone, and style with which they are used rules out a formulaic approach. The question is, what circumstances, in addition to the literal text of the communication, the reasonable reader or listener would perceive or use in determining whether or not factual assertion was being made? Great question, because all of that is so relevant to the interpretation of this song. And what they're saying is simply the use of the word PDF means that everyone thinks that, Drake is literally a PDF. Literally, to the truest definition of the word. I'd argue that word has some range to it in general, but this is a good point that they're bringing up here. Let's see how they try to frame this when it comes to how the Judge Vargas ruled. Because the audience and the context are necessarily different for each publication, it would be illogical and contrary to the approach described in the authorities cited above to define a republication's context by reference only to what the audience to the original publication would have understood. That is, however, exactly what district court did. Although the court erred in respect to each republication, its error is particularly obvious as to the Super Bowl and the political events. It is utterly implausible that millions of football fans, non-fans of all ages, who nonetheless watched the Super Bowl halftime show, and political junkies who turned into political convention would have been familiar with the entire rap battle, much less the specific lyrics of prior songs. At minimal, the reasonable listener at these events could have understood the recording's accusations of PDF as standalone assertions to be taken seriously. And there is no reason to hold as a matter of law that their interpretation of the recording is bound by however the first audience exposed would have understood it. And my issue with this argument, again, in particular, is that this battle was covered so heavily in the mainstream media. Even leading up to the Super Bowl, whether or not Dot was going to play this song was damn near part of the Super Bowl marketing, right? So they're sitting here saying a reasonable listener has no idea what any of this stuff is because they need a reasonable listener to be ignorant and unaware of what was happening here. But this wasn't a niche rap battle. This was not a niche rap battle. This was on Good Morning America. This was at the Olympics. This was across the globe. And so they're very particular in how they're cherry picking when something is niche and something is not. And this is an example of it. They're saying at the Super Bowl, nobody knew what that was at the Super Bowl. People didn't even know that song. That was also part of the marketing. More people tuned in for the Super Bowl halftime show than actually tuned in to watch the Super Bowl. It'll be interesting to see how a judge reads this a second time around.
Tomato.
Because all this sucks. The district court's contrary conclusion rests on a fundamental misunderstanding of both the amended complaint and the law. As to the former, the court reasoned that recognizing different contexts for different publications would be impermissibly retroactive because when Lamar released Not Like Us, he could not have been aware that it would be featured at the Super Bowl halftime show, but Lamar's mental state is entirely irrelevant, as is the time frame of the song's release. The amended complaint alleges defamation based on UMG's publication and republications of the defamatory material, not on any of Lamar's actions, and the time frame that is relevant with respect to UMG's republications must be the time of each republication. The actual malice injury focuses upon the state of mind of the publisher of the allegedly libelous statements at the time of publication. So this is all directed at UMG right here. As to the latter, the court erred in reasoning that whether publications constitute actionable fact or protected opinion cannot vary on the popularity they achieve, and concluding that if recording was non-actionable opinion at the time it was initially produced, then its republication would not expose UMG to liability. To the contrary, republications can and do give rise to new defamation claims. The relevant context at the moment of the alleged publication, not just initial publication, determines liability where there are republications that context is not static. And the breadth of the audience for a particular republication absolutely informs the context in which it should be assessed, ultimately whether the publisher will be liable. Holding that initial publication was not defamatory because plaintiffs failed to produce evidence of actual malice in printing of initial news story, but that plaintiffs raised a genuine issue as to actual malice related to the republication of the story about a month later because the defendant had been put on notice of the falsity yet republished that statement. So that is what Zerunge versus TSP newspapers, that's something that came out of that case. All right. And then down here at 3, in any event, any impermissible inconsistency the district court perceived was of its own making. Had the court correctly viewed the context through the eyes or ears of the reasonable listener, as alleged in the amended complaint, rather than a rap superfan, that context will remain large, even the way they put it in here. You know, like, this just makes Drake seem like he hates hip hop. Everybody around him hate rap. That's what this whole ordeal, the fact that this is still going on. Now, look, you lose a case, you might as well appeal. You know, I mean, you came this far, so I can see why he's doing it. But like, I don't even think a reasonable listener looks at any of this and says, "Yo, this is the right thing to do." You could take this entire reasonable listener argument that as they're trying to frame it and just poll people. Do you think it's right to sue somebody over a rap battle? I don't even think a reasonable listener would would make that assertion. And the idea, again, that a reasonable listener isn't familiar with rap battles ignores much of modern media over the past 40 years. I was watching K-pop Demon Hunters. K-pop Demon Hunters has a rap battle in it. Okay, they've been doing rap battles on cartoons forever. I was watching The guy who wrote, oh my gosh, I can't think of his name. The guy who wrote House Party talked about how he wrote that movie in 30 minutes. That movie came out in 91, 89, 92, something like that. Long time ago. Had a rap battle in it. Okay. They're over here trying to make it seem like only rap superfans know what hip hop is. I get it, you're Drake's lawyers, but all this,
Tomato.
that context would remain largely the same whether a reasonable listener heard the recording when it first published at a political rally or during the Super Bowl. Defining the context as the entire rap battle was erroneous to the initial publication, and it makes even less sense for subsequent republications to much broader audiences. This requires reversal. And 3, this is the one right here. This is the attack in hip hop one. This is where they go into detail about why they feel like it's necessary to destroy hip hop. This is it right here. The district court created a dangerous categorical rule that rap diss tracks can never be actionable. In considering the form of the recording, the court broadly stated that the average listener is not under the impression that a diss track is the product of a thoughtful or disinterested investigation that can convey factual content. Similarly, in evaluating the recording and the rap battle's tone and language, the court found that the songs included incendiary language and offensive accusations, which would not incline the reasonable listener to believe that Not Like Us imparts verifiable facts about Drake. Under the court's logic, defamation in rap cannot give rise to a cause of action so long as rap also includes profanity or threats of violence. That's not what they're saying. Like this sentence right here, under the court's logic, defamation in rap cannot give rise to a cause of action so long as rap also includes profanity or threats of violence. She's saying rap battle. Rap, sure. If you want to make a defamatory song, I can see there being a case there. Rap battle, this is where this is expected, right? And we'll see if the next judge has the same understanding as Judge Vargas does. The message would appear to be that so long as a song includes profanity and threats, it's immune from defamation and liability, no matter how damaging and false its factual allegations. The court's categorical rule is problematic in multiple ways. To start, it simply does not follow that if a song contains fiery rhetoric, profanity, and trash talking, no reasonable person could view it as conveying verifiable facts. Even in the informal fora, statements need to be assessed case by case, and their content can be indicative of fact rather than opinion. The court's categorical rule has substantial consequences. If rap diss tracks cannot contain statements of fact, then they are inoculated from any liability for defamation, no matter how direct and damaging the defamatory statements they contain. This case illustrates that. It's hard to imagine a statement more damaging to one's reputation and safety than being labeled a certified PDF, which elicits intense vitriol and can spur violent retaliation. The court's rule brushes aside the risk of concrete reputational harms that can and here did spill over into violence. There it is again. There's the direct assumption that the shooting at his house is because of this song. It ignores all the stuff that happened with The Weeknd. If this case went to trial, that part of discovery would have been very interesting. Very interesting. The court's rule ignores that rap music can convey factual assertions just like any other form of expression, and it is irreconcilable with the fact that rap lyrics are regularly used as evidence in criminal cases with higher proof standard of proof. If rap lyrics can be understood to contain statements of fact in the criminal context, then it must follow that reasonable listeners could understand them similarly for purposes of defamation. This is an interesting footnote too. UMG asked the district court to take judicial notice of a petition purportedly signed by Drake protesting the use of rap lyrics as evidence in criminal proceedings. Because the court did not do so, it is not in the record. Moreover, Drake's personal views on the dangers of using rap lyrics and against artists in criminal trials are irrelevant to the legal questions of whether the amended complaint states a civil claim for defamation and whether generally rap lyrics can constitute defamation. Yeah. I mean, Drake may not like it over there, but he needs it over here. A proper analysis of the statements and their relevant context shows that Drake adequately pleaded that a reasonable listener could view the defamatory material as asserting statements of fact. Because no more was required, this court should reverse the dismissal of Drake's defamation claim. All right, part 2 here, it argues mixed opinion. I'm going to skip to that. I want to get to this part in business law because I think, again, here's another example of them trying to argue on one side what a reasonable person might think on the Not Like Us side of things, and on the other side, where they needed to be convenient for themselves. Okay, so here's the New York business law part. Under B, it says Drake alleged consumer-oriented conduct. The court also incorrectly stated that even if accepted the information and belief allegations, Drake failed to sufficiently allege deceptive practices that are consumer-oriented. That was a huge part of Judge Vargas's ruling. The consumer orientation element requires a plaintiff to demonstrate that the acts or practices have a broad impact on consumers at large. Okay, that's what it is. So there's a part here where they talk about what a reasonable consumer expects when they go listen to the radio or they listen to a streaming service. And here's how it goes. Drake allegations meet this standard. UMG's deceptive acts and practices were consumer-oriented because they were decimated to the general music consuming public and marketplace and had a broad impact on consumers at large. In the digital age, recommended song search results and promoted playlists play a role in determining which music listeners will be exposed to. Reasonable consumers who pay for music subscription or streaming services expect that when a song is recommended by an algorithm on Spotify, played on the radio, or promoted on podcasts, if there is some legitimate rationale, it is uniquely aligned to that listener's taste or the playlist mood. Well, is that the case? We all remember when Drake was the feature artist on Spotify for genres he's not a part of. He was the main guy on metal. He was the main guy on country. He was the main guy on polka. All this stuff, just Drake. Their own argument here, their artist who they're defending, is an argument against the argument that they're trying to make.
Tomato.
They also say right here, they do not expect that such promotion is the result of a label's secret payments. I dispute that categorically, especially if you're doing this reasonable listener standard again. You're telling me a reasonable person would not understand that rap battles are hyperbolic in nature, regardless of whether or not they're a rap superfan. Rap has been around long enough. People have cartoons with rap in it. Kids just grow up with rap in the air. Everybody knows the theme song to The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, right? That reasonable person doesn't understand that rap battles have non-actionable opinion in it, right? But those same reasonable people, a reasonable music consumer, someone who is spending money on a streaming service or going to a streaming service on a regular basis, you think that person doesn't have a reasonable expectation that somebody getting paid to put that in that place, that bots exist to make this go, that somebody passed a bag to get somebody to the front of the line? Pick and choose, man.
Tomato.
They do not expect that such promotion is the result of a label's secret payments. Reasonable consumers also expect that when a label promotes a song for reaching 300 million streams on Spotify in just 35 days, those statistics represent real listeners, not bots. And New York General Attorney explained, when UMG previously settled payola claims, consumers have a right to not be misled about the way in which the music they hear on the radio is selected. Pay-for-play makes a mockery of claims that only the best or most popular music is broadcast. Accordingly, this case involves harm to consumers at large, not private harm that falls outside the scope of 349. Rather than crediting all these allegations, the court questioned what products, goods, or services consumers are purchasing and whether UMG's deception caused them pecuniary harm. But music streaming service customers pay for those services and assume that recommended music is based on the assessment of merits or fit. Yet because of UMG's deceptive practices, these consumers are not getting what they paid for. They instead received recommendations based on artificially inflated data. Okay. They're arguing both sides of this case. They're saying a reasonable person doesn't know anything about rap battles, so they have no idea the hyperbolic nature of what's happening on Not Like Us. And at the same time, a reasonable person who is on a streaming site, who's paying for streaming, has no idea, does not expect that the label marketing that song plays a role, that the algorithms themselves play a role. And their artist is the artist whose face was on all playlists for genres he's not a part of with the rollout of his project. I think it was Scorpion. It'll be very interesting to see what the next judge sees when he reads this case. Because I look at this and this case is really a great representation of Drake. It's whatever it really needs to be to get to the next stop. whatever it needs to be to get ahead. We'll see how it goes. Let me know what you guys think about this. My name is Justin Hunt. Like and subscribe to the channel. Follow @TheCompanyMan on everything, including the Company Man podcast, wherever you listen to podcasts, including the Third Verse podcast with Zach Quell and DJ Bormilli and myself. It's all happening.
Justin Hunt is here, it's all happening. Justin Hunt is here, it's all happening. The mathematical breakdown of this mighty game of rap we in. It's boom bapping. Systematical culture views us radical, it's all happening. Shaking hands and dapping it. Life through the lens of hip hop, from trip hop to yes, y'all. You don't stop, you don't stop. Justin Hunt is here, it's all happening. It's all happening, yes, it's all happening. Justin Hunt is here, it's all happening. It's all happening, yes, it's all happening.